Oh, those aren't for free. You gotta... Hey squids, it's me Sid, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be discussing what I read in May. So, this list is in no particular order. I do have it on my computer because I don't have physical books for some of them, because some I read as ebooks, some I did read as physical books, and then I gave to friends or family for them to read, and some I don't know where I put. So let's get into it. So this is actually in backwards order, so the book that is at the top of this list I actually read last. So I read Austerlitz by W.G. Sebald, and this was a book that I read for a challenge that I'm doing. I'm trying to read every book on my top 100 book chart thing. It's a poster and it has scratch offs. You can look at that on my TikTok, which will be in the description. I rated that about 3 stars. It was okay. And this is a book that is about this young boy who lived in Prague and got sent away to live in England when he was very young because of Nazi occupation of Prague. And he is just really trying to figure out who he is and his history and all of that. And I thought that was very interesting. And I liked the content of the book. I just thought the formatting was really bad because it was just this very like wall-to-wall words with barely any paragraphs, any breaks, anything like that. And I did read it as an ebook, just as a aside. And it also was told in like a weird perspective, because what happened was the narrator of the book kept meeting up with the main character, and the main character told him his life story. But it was very hard sometimes to know who was saying what was happening, stuff like that, because it was very confusing. That was Austerlitz by W.G. Sebald. The next book is The Rhythm of Time by Questlove and S.A. Cosby. This is a middle grade book, I believe. It was very short. I also read this as an ebook. And I also gave it a 3 star. And this is about a young boy who travels back in time and meets his dad, and so much goes wrong. It seems to be kind of inspired by Back to the Future, because he does go back in time and meet his father. Of course, they don't fall in love, but it does seem kind of inspired by Back to the Future, as the boy also has this friend, and the friend was the one who sent him back in time. I thought this book was okay. Obviously, I gave it 3 stars. But I thought it was a little lacking, to be honest. And obviously, I am not the intended audience per se, but you could tell the parts that the author really, really enjoyed talking about, like the rapping, the rhythm, the stuff like that. It was so fleshed out. It was so interesting to read. And then a bunch of the technology stuff, it was very just like, oh, it's a fact, rather than like explaining how stuff came about. And so I thought that it could have just been expanded more, and I think it would be more interesting. But that was The Rhythm of Time. And then next was Baby by Patricia Mcclellan, I think. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I'm sorry if I'm not. So this was also a book I read for a challenge. I'm trying to read all the books off my physical TBR. And so any book that, if you see any book that's turned backwards on my shelf, those are books that I haven't read. And so this was the first book of my challenge. It was very short, and I rated it 4.5 stars. So this is a book about a baby who gets left to this family on this island because the mother can't take care of her. And the mother states that she'll be back when she has time and can actively take care of this child. But this family, who had previously lost a child, becomes very attached to this new baby. And so it's very much about heartbreak and loss, and it was very sad. It almost made me cry. But that one was a good start to my challenge. So that was Baby. Then is Count Your Lucky Stars by Alexandria Bellafleur. And this I rated 3 stars. This is a second chance romance, very trope heavy, except for it is queer, where the main relationship is between 2 women. And I just guess I don't really like second chance romances, because we don't, as the reader, we don't see a lot of the tension that built up. And for this book, every conflict was based on miscommunication, and that for me is just really uncomfortable to read, especially when you have both perspectives of the book. So I rated that 3 stars, and that was Count Your Lucky Stars. Then Hunted by Darcy Coates. I am a big Darcy Coates fan. She writes a lot of horror, a lot of paranormal horror. Hunted was not paranormal, and I rated it 5 stars. So Hunted is about this girl that goes missing in the woods, and her family is trying to figure out where she went. And the police are trying to help, but it's very much, they think she just went missing. They don't think anything of it. But then some pictures turn up. I thought it was really interesting. It was really creepy. It left me guessing, definitely. I didn't really expect who it was. But yes, that was definitely one of Darcy Coates' better books, to be honest. So I would definitely give that a read. And that was Hunted. Next, we have Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen, which I also rated 5 stars. This book takes place in South Carolina, which is where I'm from. So that was a cool little thing. But Other Birds is about this group of people who live in this apartment complex, kind of. It only has like 5, 6 maybe occupants, and each of them has a secret. They all have some sort of trauma that they have to work through. So it's very much a found family where they like work through their trauma and they become family and all of that. It was very cute. There is magical realism in it, which I thought was done very well. But yeah, so that was Other Birds, which I gave 5 stars. And then next, I read What If 2 Additional Serious Scientific Answers to Absurd Hypothetical Questions by Randall Munroe. 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely read it. It was amazing. So, Randall Munroe is an ex-NASA worker, NASA scientist. He didn't get fired, he just left. But so now he uses that knowledge and stuff to answer absurd hypothetical questions that people ask him. And this book was a compilation of those answers. And he's also a cartoon artist, who draws stick figures. So it's just a very funny book. It's very silly. I loved it. I'm also a science person, so that's probably why I loved it so much. But definitely go check it out. It was very good. Okay, next is The Bone Spindle by Leslie Vedder, which I gave 4.75 stars. So close to a 5, but I could not in good conscience give it a 5. It was a Sleeping Beauty retelling, which I was so interested in. I thought it was so interesting. I was ready. and it kind of let me down. It was still very good. Like, I'm very excited, but it is very obviously the first book in a series, which isn't a terrible thing, but when I read a first book in a series, I prefer to have at least a little bit of closure, so it's not as much of a cliffhanger or very obviously, oh, there's more to the story, but you have to wait a couple years to get the rest of the story. That I thought was annoying. And I also thought it was very obvious who the bad people were and like what they wanted. I just thought it fell a little flat for what it was, but it was still very fun, very magical, all of that. And it does have a side lesbian romance, which I'm all for. It was great. So that was The Bone Spindle. And then we have From Below by Darcy Coates. Told you I love Darcy Coates. And I rated this 3.75 because it wasn't as good. This is a story about this group of divers who are going down to this ship that has been lost for several centuries, maybe? I'm not sure the exact date, but for a long time. And they are going to film a documentary of this ship, which I'm all for. I love creepy ships. You know, all of that is super fun. It does have a supernatural element to it that was done very well. I thought it was very creepy, very terrifying. The thing I didn't like about it was the fact that a lot of the conflict between the divers seemed very made up by one of them, I suppose. Because they were constantly like fighting, like stuff like that between each other, lying to each other, stuff like that, and I'm like, I just thought it almost took away from the central conflict of the novel, which is why I rated it 3.75 stars. And that was From Below. And then we have What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, which I gave 5 stars. Go read it. If you like horror, if you like Edgar Allan Poe, go read it. It's fantastic. It is a horror retelling of the fall of the House of Usher. Obviously, the fall of the House of Usher is kind of a horror in and of itself, but it was so good. The science of it was amazing. The horror was terrifying. It was so interesting. The detail that T. Kingfisher got into this book, chef's kiss. Amazing. Amazing. Just go read it. It was so good. It was so good. And then I have The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward, which I rated 3.5. And I thought this isn't a horror book, which is what I thought it was and what it was advertised to me as. And I don't think it's horror. It's definitely a psychological thriller. It's just not horror. And I rated that 3.5 stars. But I was looking for that horror element that like terrified me, that like kept me up. And I never got that. That was never something that I felt, I guess. And I think the lead up was very interesting to that, but I feel like there wasn't enough falling action, I suppose. I wanted more. And I will say, spoiler alert, there is depictions of dissociative identity disorder and a lot of trauma. I don't remember if there was a trigger warning or not. But So, end of spoiler. So it just wasn't quite what I was looking for, I suppose, from the book. And that was The Last House on Needless Street. Then I read The Sun and the Star by Mark Oshiro and Rick Riordan. 5 out of 5. Amazing. Perfect. It was great. Chef's kiss. 5 stars. Go read it. I am biased. I am biased on this one because I love the Percy Jackson series. Anything Rick Riordan writes, I will read. That's mythology based, I will say. Because he has written some books before he wrote Percy Jackson, which I have not read. But, like, the Percy Jackson series, the Last Olympian series, the Kane Chronicles, the Magnus Chase trilogy, the Trials of Apollo, all of that, I've read, I've loved. It was great. I thought it was really interesting to get to see both of their perspectives, I guess, both Nico and Will's perspective on the relationship. If you don't know, this book is about Nico and Will, 2 of the characters from the Percy Jackson extended series, and they're going on an adventure to Tartarus, the deepest underworld where all the monsters and things reside, in order to save a friend. And I thought it was just really interesting to get to see both perspectives. I will say it was a little confusing because it tended to, like, change perspective in a way that I haven't seen of any other Rick Riordan book. But I thought it was super interesting and super good, and if you like Percy Jackson, you should definitely go read it. It was amazing. It was really, really good. And then I have This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Mohatar. 5 out of 5. Amazing. Go read it. There's so many books that I read this month that I'm like, just go read it. This one, literally, it's only like a couple, it's like 200 pages, maybe less. Chef's kiss. Chef's kiss. This is a book about basically lesbian enemies to lovers. There's these 2 sides on this time war, basically. So they're going to the past, to the future, through different alternative timelines to fix things so their agency has more power than the other, and it's just this constant battle. And so these 2 women are on opposing sides of this time war, and so they have to fight against each other, but they slowly fall in love. It was just so good. I thought it was so sweet. It is written in like a letter style, because that is mainly how they interact, is through letters that they leave for each other. And so it is so cute. It's so cute to like see them finding the letters, reading it, doing all of this. You feel the yearning because they never really see each other. It's just through these letters that they are falling in love. It was so cute. It was so good. It was so good. And that was This Is How We Lose the Time War. 5 out of 5. Amazing. Next is I Kissed Shara Wheeler by Casey McQuiston. I have read other books by this author that I thought were much better. I thought I Kissed Shara Wheeler kind of fell flat for me. This book is about this girl, Shara Wheeler, who disappears, and she leaves letters for her boyfriend, her next door neighbor, and her academic rival to find out where she is. And it's a kooky, wacky race to try and find her before the end of before graduation. That's why I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. It is a lesbian rivals to lovers, which I love. I love a rivals to lovers. That sort of tension is amazing, especially because this is an academic rivals to lovers. I love academic rivals to lovers. However, this book takes place in Alabama, which I've never lived in, but it takes place in this very, very religious community. And I suppose that living in South Carolina, I've experienced some of the things that they're talking about, and it was, to me, it was very much almost like it was like too much in a way, like it was unrealistic type. But that was just a me thing. I thought most of the setting was very, very good. The thing I think I disliked the most was how dense both the rivals were. And it just, I don't know. Anyway, that was I Kissed Shara Wheeler, which I gave 3 stars. Next is Tess of the Road, which I gave 4.5 stars. This was a long book, and this book was by Rachel Hartman, is who wrote this book. So Tess of the Road is about this girl, Tess, who has caused trouble for her family all of her life. She has been told she's the troublemaker, she deserves all of this hate that her family is giving her, and eventually she decides she's had enough and she runs away. So this book is basically the adventures that happens to her when she runs away. Now this is a sequel series, I will say, so some of the stuff I wasn't totally sure about. And I was also confused reading this book about who the target audience was, because it deals very much with like adult, mature topics about love, sex education, sex, pregnancies, stuff like that, and it's very heavy. And it also deals with talks about like religion, how different religions affect you and stuff like that, and it was just insanely heavy to me, but it also almost read like a young adult middle grade-ish novel. And so it was very confusing because I was expecting it to be talked about in this certain, all these heavy topics to be talked about in this certain way, and it wasn't. So I thought that was the interesting part. But this fantasy world, oh my goodness, it is really just amazingly written. Honestly, the world building in this novel is amazing. Definitely one of the best fantasy world buildings that I've ever read. So yeah, that was Tess of the Road. And I abandoned 2 books this month, and I'm going to tell you why I abandoned them. So there will probably be spoilers for these books. If you don't want to know spoilers, I'm just going to tell you the books I abandoned. I abandoned Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas, and I also abandoned Beartown by Frederick Backman. So, if you don't want spoilers on these, thank you for watching. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Okay, so I abandoned A Court of Wings and Ruin for a couple reasons. Now, I understand A Court of Thorns and Roses is one of BookTube, Book Talk, Book Instagram, all of it. They love this book series. I don't really prefer it, and I think that's because I prefer, if it's going to be a fantasy romance, I prefer it to be more heavy on the fantasy than on the romance, and I think A Court of Thorns and Roses definitely focuses more on the romance aspect than it does the fantasy aspect, which is not just something that I prefer. And I've tried to get through this series, and I personally just don't think it's for me. And I understand if you enjoy it and all of that, it just is not for me. I also thought that Feyre was being unfair, in this book specifically, A Court of Wings and Ruin. She was being unfair to Lucian and her maid, who I did forget the name of, but I loved her. She was great. She was being unfair to them because she was basically saying that they sided with Tamlin and they didn't help her when they saw her struggle. Except for the fact that Tamlin is a High Lord. He has more power than Lucian and this maid. And they both have people to protect. Lucian's entire family is basically Tamlin. So going against him and losing that family is not something Lucian could do. And as for the maid, she has other family that she has to protect. If she goes against Tamlin and loses her job, what's going to happen to her family? And the thing I dislike the most is Feyre thought about that. And then she was like, no, they're all bad because they didn't care. They didn't try and help me. And it doesn't matter if they had consequences for their action, for helping me. It doesn't matter. They should have done it anyway. And I thought that was just really annoying. So that is why I abandoned A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. The reason I abandoned Beartown is because there were no trigger warnings. This book is focused around this town, Beartown, and it is a hockey town. And so the Junior Hockey League is getting ready to play this final, or this semifinal. There's this big hockey star who's playing and all of that. And it happens in the middle of the book. So they're halfway through the book, by the way, which means there was way too much setup. The star of the junior team sexually assaults a 16-year-old girl. And there was no warning for that. None at all at the beginning. And it was, I won't say it was graphic, but it was told from her point of view. And I refused to read the rest of it because I understand where it's going to go. Because it's going to be the people that are like, oh, she was intoxicated. It doesn't matter. He didn't really do anything. On the other side, it's going to be like, she said no, that is that. He should go to jail. And I have seen enough of that in the news, all of that. I just don't want to personally read the book. So I thought the exposition was way too long, and I thought that it was despicable to not have trigger warnings. But other than that, I can't tell you more about the book because I did abandon it. So that is all the books I read in May, which is, I read 15 books this month. That will probably go down because I am working part-time now, and so I won't have as much time to read. But thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!